Good evening, everyone. Welcome. If we could call this meeting to order. If we could please start with a moment of silence for prayer or reflection. Thank you.
Point of order, if I could, Your Worship. Today is October the 1st. October the 1st is the International Day of Older Persons, and I just wanted to make a couple of comments about this. Councillor Turnbull on the weekend had the privilege of talking with someone who you will all know when I say her name, Miss Evelyn Stahl, who has been a volunteer in our community and a volunteer leader for many, many years. And she proclaims that she is an older person. Well, you know, she's 99 years old, and in October of 1999 was the first day that the United Nations declared an International Day of Older Persons. The purpose is to foster international awareness of the importance of seniors in society and the need for intergenerational respect and support. It's interesting, I Googled this today. I thought this was quite interesting. Almost 7 million people, this is worldwide, are now over the age of 60, and by 2050, 2 billion people, over 20% of the world's population, will be 60 or older. Canada's senior population is the fastest growing in the world, which in 1999 was 12% of our total population, and will be by 2041 closer to 23% of all Canadians. Now that's really interesting, isn't it? And it's important to bring this information forward so that we can honor those folks. We have a tremendous volunteer base in Medicine Hat. We enjoy, it is dominated by seniors, but they certainly aren't the only ones who volunteer. Ms. Stahl has been a stalwart supporter of older people volunteering and of everyone volunteering in their community. But there's many other contributions that seniors make, and I think it's important. This is not only a United Nations proclamation, but it's one we need to make sure that we honor the seniors in our community for all they do to make our community the wonderful place it is. So I just wanted to say that tonight, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your Worship, I have a point of privilege also. As you're aware, in July of 2017, we hosted the Special Olympics Alberta, and at that time we had athletes compete, and from that performance that they did in Medicine Hat, some of them were picked to Team Alberta, and there was 2 that were picked from Team Alberta that went from Medicine Hat that went to the Canadian Championships of Special Olympics in Canada. And they did so well, including one coach. They did so well that now that they're going to compete for Team Canada, actually, in March of 2019 in Abu Dhabi. So they get to go there and compete as Medicine Hattians for Canada and to raise the flag. So I think the names are Michelle McDonald, who competes in 10-pin bowling, and Christine Sullivan, who competes in powerlifting. And the coach is Pat Enns, who's been with Special Olympics for many, many years, probably since the inauguration of Special Olympics within Medicine Hat. So I'm very proud that they competed here, and now they're going to the world. So it's a great privilege for them, and I'm sure they'll do well. I'm sure we'll hear about them again when they're competing there in March, and hopefully they can bring back a medal for Medicine Hat and for Canada. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Worship, one more if I could. Yep. I would like, on behalf of Council, to say a few things about our departing CAO at the end of the meeting, but I just wanted to bring the attention to everyone to welcome our incoming, or our new CAO, who has been with us once before, and we're very happy to have him back. So welcome Bob Nicolay to the CAO chair on behalf of Council and all of us.
Thank you. All right.
Moving on to tonight's meeting then. First we have adoption of the agenda.
Any additions? Okay, seeing none, accept the agenda.
Okay, next we have adoption of the minutes from our last meeting on page 3 of the packets from September 17th.
Any errors, omissions? Okay, seeing none.
Moving on now to reports. Our first report's item 4.1 on page 6. Administrative Committee meeting of September 19th, and this report's for information.
I'll move the report as indicated.
Second.
Questions, comments? Yeah, we have a presentation there. That's just kind of nice. Is that what that is? We don't usually have that for a tender recommendation.
I think that was just there just for informational purposes, if
okay.
anyone had a question.
That's a nice addition. All right. Seeing none, if we could vote. That was unanimous. Thank you.
Our next report's item 4.2 on page 9, Development and Infrastructure Committee meeting of September 19th. Again, this is just for information.
If we could call the vote.
I'll move that. Second.
Yeah, sorry. If we could vote. That was unanimous. Thank you.
Item 4.3, page 10, Energy and Utilities Committee, September 20th. Again, just for information.
So moved. Second that.
If we could vote. That was unanimous. Thank you.
Item 4.4, on page 11, you'll find the Public Services Committee meeting of September 24th. This is recommended for adoption, and the smoke-free outdoor public places bylaw amendments.
Your worship, members of council, I would like to move this for adoption and then speak to it if I could.
Thank you. Go ahead.
What I would like to say is a couple of things, I guess. You will see in front of you a negative motion, which is that the three people on the Public Services Committee are not recommending the bylaw 4498, which will come up later in the agenda, to amend the smoke-free outdoor public places bylaw. So I think what we need to do here is, rather than bring it forward for discussion at this point in time, if council would bear with us and we can talk about it at the second reading of bylaw, which would be the discussion phase.
Yep. Okay with that. Yep. All right. If we could vote. So, yeah, this is a motion for adoption, but the recommendation is not to. Correct. So I'm, okay. Go ahead. And that was unanimous. Thank you.
Item 4.5, page 24, Administrative Committee meeting at September 26th. This one's for adoption.
So moved.
I get a seconder.
Second.
Second that.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Friesen?
If I could, I guess to the CAO, this is a substantial request that's being recommended. I'm just wondering, it's not really in here in a ton of detail. Does this request include an amount for the newly formed Sport and Event Council? If you could elaborate on that a bit, I'd sure appreciate it.
Through the chair to Councillor Friesen. Yes, it's very clear in the RFP documentation. Now, it's not with a set amount. So we have basically said this amount needs to include all the administration and operation of that Sports and Event Council. Has to be taken into account when you bid for this entire contract. Sports and Event Council have indicated that they think they need about $100,000 a year to operate. But we didn't ask for them to specify out how much of their grant would go towards that particular activity. That's up to them how they allocate it internally, but they must cover that set of activities.
Councillor Hirsch?
Well, along the same line, so forgive me, within the RFP, I just recall, is there an ability for the city within the RFP to look at financial statements from time to time, the quarterly review, et cetera, in terms of, because what's going to happen if you're saying that that's kind of going to be rolled in, how do we ensure that the Sports Council gets kind of their fair share? And I guess ultimately, do we have an ability to allocate, break it out? But I guess I'm just wondering, what's the mechanism for us to get that financial information?
Through the chair, there are specified deliverables under the contract. So if you recall, this is now, and I use the word grant, it's not a grant, it is a competitive contract that's awarded based on an RFP. So it's not like they have an independent organization and council acts as a board or puts a representative on the board where you can really look at the financials and audit and all those sorts of things, because it's a contract obtained in a competitive process. So just like we wouldn't normally ask, and we just gave a contract to Aecon for the North Node, we wouldn't go in and audit Aecon's financial statements. That's none of our business, as long as they deliver to the specificity of the contract that they've been given, and in accordance with the bid that they've given. However, having said that, our business support officer is certainly putting the regular reporting, and as you know, Jason Anderson has been here in front of council a number of times and reported on their activities and given that indication of how they are allocating their funds and what they are delivering with it. So there's the opportunity to question and receive those reports, both in a closed forum and in an open forum, as council wishes.
So just as secondary, so I think it's just important for us to understand, because the public out there, although it's contracted versus grant, so the other flip of the coin would be CCDA then, correct? So where they get grant money, they would in turn give us evidence in terms of their financial performance otherwise. But I think it's important for Hatters or the taxpayer to understand that there's a little bit of a veil, if you will, that we're contracting with individuals that we think are going to operate with good financial reasoning, and they're going to work good due diligence, and they're going to perform the rigors of what was expected within the RFP. But we really don't have an ability to opine on where that money goes. And I guess that's my point, that maybe it isn't a form of a question, but it is important to understand that delineation.
You're okay then? Okay. Councillor Turnbull?
Thank you, Your Worship. So my question to the Chair to CEO on the same subject is, do we have in that RFP the desired hours that we expect the information center to be open to serve the tourist public to the fullest? And the second question would be that a 4-year contract, I get it that everybody wants a financial surety in operating any business or enterprise, but do we have an out in that clause should we be dissatisfied as a council in their ability to provide us that marketing tool as we see it? 4 years is a long time. It's $1.6 million. I sure want to make sure that we are getting a good bang for that buck. So I just wanted to have that question asked.
Through the chair, I have to admit I'm not familiar with the cancellation clause. There's always a cancellation clause in a contract, but the details around what it takes to cancel and how that cancellation happens, I'd have to get back to you on that. In terms of opening hours, yes, it's in there that they need to operate the visitor center. It needs to be to specified hours and certain deliverables. So it's very much a focus on deliverables as opposed to how they operate it. That's both with with this contract and with the event center as well. It's about you must deliver these services.
So I'm happy that at least we know there's a clause. I don't need to know the specifics of the clauses, as long as we have the ability, should we need to, based on lack of not better word, production or the quality of the service that we're giving our citizens. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, if we could call the question. That was unanimous. Thank you.
Moving along now to reports for reception. Item 5.1 on page 28, decision report for the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board on September 11th.
I'll move the report for reception.
Second.
Any comments? Okay, if we could vote. That was unanimous. Thank you.
Item 5.2, page 33, the Heritage Resources Committee meeting of September 11th.
I'll move that report for reception and make a comment once I get a seconder.
I'll second that.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, Your Worship. If I could just make a quick comment on Saratoga Park. The HRC is hosting an open house on October 17th between 4 and 8 p.m. at the Esplanade, just to get people's feedback. Perhaps people have some historical perspective on Saratoga Park, or just some comments, or you just want to come down and learn a little bit about the history of that area of our community. HRC is going down the path of getting a historical designation, and we need community feedback before we move forward. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we could vote. That was unanimous, thank you.
Next, we have item 5.3, page 38, the Police Commission minutes of September 20th.
I move these for reception, and there's just a couple of comments I'd like to make.
I get a second.
Second.
Thank you. Councillor Friesen?
Thank you, Your Worship. The first thing I just wanted to, as an information item, it's related to police. Let Council know that I've been appointed to an AUMA working group on revisions to the Police Act, so that's just for information. Second thing, though, and far more exciting than my AUMA appointment, is that the police service has a short-term contract with someone who just retired from the Medicine Hat Women's Shelter to develop a diversity and inclusion strategic plan. So she's going to talk to stakeholders, she's going to review some policies, she's going to review how certain practices are done within the police service to make sure that we're free from bias and help create a service that's more reflective of the community we work in. So we're not talking inclusion only in terms of gender, female, male, but in all aspects of diversity. And I just wanted to highlight this because it's really forward thinking. It's something that the big services, you know, they like to toot their own horn about how great they are at this, but I want to toot our own horn about how great we are going to be at this. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Samraj?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a chance to attend the Police Commission meeting last week, and I just wanted to talk about one of the presentations that they had there, the Community Standards Assistance Summer Program. I think a large majority of the emails and calls I get have to do with bylaw enforcement and people following the rules and such and that. And if bylaws are a way for us to kind of get along with each other, it was really interesting to see this proactive approach where these two summer students traveled to different yards and informed homeowners about what the standards actually were. So I think it took the onus away from neighbors kind of complaining about each other, and kind of helping the city educate people about what the bylaws around yard maintenance was. I thought it was a really interesting program, and I definitely see potential for this type of program to be expanded into other areas of bylaw enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Varga?
Just to piggyback on that, what Councillor Samraj said, I think it's a great program. You see the results and the pictures that are actually in the report, and it's great to see that, and can't believe that some of the residents look like they do in some of the pictures that are there, but they did get cleaned up pretty well. Question to you, is it going to continue on, Councillor Friesen, in years to come, or was this just a pilot project for this year?
Well, if I could, it was a project for this year. But when these two very vibrant young women gave their presentation, they were asked, would you come back next year? And they said yes. So I can't say 100% that it will be next year, but I can sure say that with the success we saw in a very constructive, positive program, that we'll do what we can to make sure it happens again. And I just, if I could just add, Councillor Samraj thought that, and you didn't bring it up, but you thought that a presentation like that, we have a presentation at every Police Commission meeting, which is a very, very informative. This one is so close to people's hearts, really, that he thought maybe it would be interesting to have the two young women come and give it at council. So if we could, at an open council meeting, when we have time, have that presentation, I think it would be great for everybody to hear. And I'm sorry, Councillor Varga, if you had more.
No, I just have a little bit more to add to that. I actually saw these two ladies in my back alley one day. So I didn't know who they were, but they were in my back alley looking at residences down the block from me. And unfortunately, those residents still look the same today as they did then. So I just wondered how, now that it's brought up, that whether something couldn't have been done or the people didn't comply with what was being told to them. But I know they were in my back lane and they were actually writing down some stuff and looking what the address was and what was happening. And it was overgrown trees and big grass and kind of like some of the pictures. So I'd be interested to see where it went from that part. But I hope the program continues, and I think it's a positive program where they get the residents to actually do something about it. Maybe it makes them feel guilty when two young ladies come up and say, can you help us out with this problem here? So it's a great program, I believe.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the police report? All right, if we could vote. And that was unanimous, thank you.
New bylaws. Item 6.1, page 70, bylaw 4498. A bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend bylaw 4136, the smoke-free outdoor public places bylaw.
Your Worship, I'm going to have to ask for some guidance. This bylaw is sponsored by Public Services Committee. I was going to beg leave to introduce it for a first reading. And I realized that in dealing with the Public Services report, we might already have dealt with first reading and that it's off the table.
Good question. Could you introduce it? Are you intending to make an amendment?
That's my second
thing. So maybe you might want to ask somebody else to introduce it.
Well, through the chair, the report was for adoption, but council can defeat or pass a bylaw on the face of the bylaw. Doesn't matter that the report was adopted.
She's also planning on doing an amendment.
Yeah,
but
it's not an amendment.
If you're planning, okay, if you, just generally to council, if you are planning an amendment to something, then my advice to you would be not to bring it to the table or second it. I'll have someone else do that. But we do need it to be on the table, so we will have to have it for first reading to get it on the table, and then you can deal with it.
Okay. So, Your Worship, I'm not planning an amendment, but if someone else could move it, I think it would be good.
Maybe Councillor Herzog.
I'll move that bylaw be.
Okay.
And I'll second.
First time.
Second. Okay, so it's just first reading, so if we could vote. Okay, that was 4 and 6 in favor, 2 against. Passes. First reading. Somebody can introduce second reading. Same two, if you could.
I'll move this bylaw be read a second time.
I will second.
Okay, any questions, comments, debate on second reading? Councillor Friesen.
Your Worship, I will not be supporting this bylaw at second reading. I do not believe that having the provisions around cannabis contained within the tobacco bylaw are going to work for this community. I say that based on a tremendous amount of public feedback that I've had, and also on some research I've done both with other communities, provincially, and just with many different community organizations. So I will not support this for second reading, and I'm going to ask, not for an amendment, but I'm going to ask for a new bylaw after we've dealt with this one.
After it's defeated?
Yes.
If it is? Okay.
Yes.
Councillor Samraj?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The story of how we got here is, I guess, is kind of interesting because it kind of talks about how complicated this this subject is. The initial decision that was before council was whether to treat cannabis consumption like smoking or whether to treat it like alcohol, because in some ways this substance kind of falls between the two. We initially directed staff to develop a bylaw to expand the smoking bylaw to include cannabis, but there's been some developments in the month since that time. I think most notably the police service and Alberta Health Services and the schools have asked to treat us more like alcohol. For me, who was kind of always on the fence, that certainly has been persuasive to me, while recognizing that we do need to create legitimate ways for people to consume illegal substance. But I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, Your Worship. Well, I originally looked at this proposed bylaw and saw it as a positive solution. I do not view the cannabis legislation that is coming forward as a life-changing issue for our community. The sky is not going to fall on the 17th of October. The proposal from a number of people to connect it to alcohol, while I understand why they're saying that, it is so incredibly tough to even compare the two. When I could drive home tonight from this meeting and stop at 8 different locations to have a beverage, there is absolutely no places where somebody is able to do that with cannabis on the 17th of October. The province has dropped the ball miserably in terms of helping us out with that. I also see this bylaw, no matter what ends up being proposed, as being significantly difficult to enforce in any way, shape, or form. So unfortunately, while I do see this as a solution, the community spoke quite loudly to me, and I will support the views of the community that this is not the way that we need to go.
Okay, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Initially, I was also in favor of combining this with our current smoking bylaw, and having some sober second thought on this, and having talked to a lot of people in the community, I certainly see why I would be more in favor now of a total ban of consuming cannabis in public places. My only issue with that is for those folks who maybe live in condo developments or whatever, and maybe their condo association says, oh, there'll be no smoking in our condos, then where do they go? You know, I happen to be chairman of the Cypress View Foundation, and of course we don't allow smoking in there, but we do have a place where people can go to smoke. So now, if people want to consume cannabis, are they allowed to go into that regular smoking shelter? So this is a very complicated issue, and I certainly see that we want to have this bylaw redrafted, and I certainly will not be supporting it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do agree with Councillor McIntosh. I think his points were well taken. I originally was going to support this bylaw based on the rules for smoking. But I think we have to sort of take a step back and try to find a compromise. I'm not sure that's possible, but to find some sort of compromise so that whether you like the fact that marijuana is legal or not, it's legal. And that's the way it is. Other provinces have different rules. Ontario is going smoking rules, so is Saskatchewan. And I agree with Councillor Hirsch when he says, or sorry, McIntosh, if I can go to any bar downtown, I can go to any restaurant and have a beverage with my meal. I can't pull out a cigarette and smoke, so therefore you can't pull out a marijuana. So we're trying to judge marijuana on alcohol on one level and yet smoking on another level, so it falls somewhere between those cracks. So in fairness to, and I think it came up from our chief of police today, and I think he was absolutely correct when he says, look, this city sets bylaws to help our citizens decide what the quality of life should be, how should we respect other people's ability to use parks, where they walk their dogs, how they live their lives, rules for fire pits so that neighbors are not bothered by that. And so perhaps just having rules will make people understand both sides. For those who need to smoke it for either medical purposes or for recreation, these are not the bad people. These are law-abiding citizens who are going to be using a product that is legal. So we need to not force what I call, as our CEO had said one time, thank you, Maretta, for it, if we force everybody inside smoking, you create what's called a hothouse, where people can't breathe in there, their kids are in there. We can say, oh, well, that's parents' problem. They should not do that. Well, we're not here to try and what's the word I'm looking for, to tell people how they have to live their lives. This is a legal product. It's a very difficult situation. I get it. I get why the police are adamant that it should be alcohol, because what we don't want is people driving high when they're under marijuana, and so they become intoxicated. And so the rules of the road affect them. So I agree, I'm not going to vote for this bylaw, but I hope when we come back at a later date that we will have a bylaw that will try to find that really, this is a teeter-totter, and it just keeps going like this. And so hopefully we can get one that just levels out and we can all agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Varga.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too will not be supporting this bylaw. Cannabis is totally something different than alcohol and a pure cigarette. So it should be treated different, and hopefully we can come up with some good variance in what we're going to do when it comes to a bylaw and how we're going to do it and where it can be consumed and taken, and hopefully we can come up with that level playing field, the teeter-totter, what you're saying, Councillor Turnbull, where we can figure out where it can be done, and hopefully that'll happen in the near future. I know it's the 17th. Like Councillor McIntosh said, I don't think the sky is going to fall in when it comes into effect on the 17th of October. People that do it will continue to do it. They'll find a way to do it, and we'll still smell it at our events. I know we will down the road, so it'll be tough to manage with the police too, right? It's going to be a tough situation of enforcing it and figuring where that person is. Even if he is walking down the street or in a park or somewhere, you still got to catch him in the act, and that might be the toughest thing to do down the road. So hopefully we can come up with a great bylaw that's going to look at just cannabis itself.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hirsch.
Well, Your Worship, I'm pleased to see a lot of people having some sober second thought. You know, the funny thing is when you construct bylaws on stuff that is absolutely brand new to everyone, there is no precedence. Municipalities across Canada are dealing with this exactly the same time we are. So when we look across our municipal friends and look to see what they're doing, and for example, you know, Pot Park was introduced in Calgary and got defeated horribly. You know, really, we're going in blind. And I think a lot of people, a lot of times, they just kind of want to just jump to familiarity. So when we had this first on the record, that, you know, this is up for consideration, you know, people instantly think, well, it should be just like tobacco. No, it should be just like alcohol. But I think instead of just having a knee-jerk reaction to this, if you let the story unwind, and you'll figure out quite quickly how it cannot be tobacco and it cannot be alcohol. You know, and I won't repeat a lot of the stuff that was stated, but for example, you'd never be able to walk into an establishment just like you do a bar and light up. You've got staffing issues, WCB, who's going to be that employee that's going to be in that room all day long? And for the most part, you can't even be in the room because you have to be outside. So are we breaking the laws by smoking? You know, there's so many innuendos that are still left undone. You know, again, no landlord would allow any sort of activity in that sort of building because of the smell and the repercussions in terms of fixing and changing things. The odor is so foul and it absolutely permeates. So I think the bottom line, we've got a legal activity, but cannot find a home for consumption. So I think for us, it is just a matter of having a little bit of review. Last meeting when we did talk about the early adoption of it within up to tobacco, I felt, and again, reiterate the fact that the tobacco bylaw is doing its job. Having said that, I see a person walking down the street having a cigarette. I get it. But I can't pick up the phone and phone the police, and the enforcement of this, you know, I don't want to bring a bylaw, quite frankly, that isn't something that is relatively enforceable. And I appreciate the efforts of police. I appreciate the efforts of the citizens to try to do the right thing. Again, I agree with the chief of police that says, hey, you know what, the establishment of a bylaw is just, can we all get along? And I've got confidence in Hatters. I don't want to be that guy at the end of the day because there's 1,000 complaints as we roll into this, and I agree with some of the statements. the world's not going to be ending after October 17th. I just think we need to kind of roll into this as we go, get an understanding of where we're at, take a snapshot, but I won't be supporting a tobacco and or an alcohol, anything in that alignment, so I appreciate the position that council, what I'm hearing from them, is taking. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on second reading? All right, well, I think Councillor McIntosh, actually, if I can be succinct, nailed it with one comment. The province has dropped the ball on this. If they would have just come out with a universal legislation that would have worked for the entire province and maybe allowed pubs, marijuana pubs, or some place where these people could consume this legally, would have made it so much simpler. But unfortunately, we're all left to grapple with this as an individual municipalities in this province, and that's very, very unfortunate. And perhaps they will come to their senses and have a universal in the future. Councillor Hirsch?
So just a supplemental. We just had AUMA, to which I wasn't able to attend. So those that went, was there a lot of discussion on that? Councillor Varga, you attended?
There was not, right?
And what was the position of AUMA in terms of lobbying? So AUMA is basically our lobby group that lobbies to other provincial, federal levels of government. What was their position in lobbying position?
Well, they had a resolution that said that they don't want it to be done anywhere in public places. And it was overwhelming. It was 87% in favor of that. There was still a few that said that the tough part was that how do you stop it from being done in buildings and, you know what I mean, and in their own places, and it would affect them, the people that actually might have to take it, and they have to do it within a building that they live in. So they brought that argument up, but it was still passed overwhelming that no public places for consumption, and it was 87% of the membership that was there. There was 1,100 delegates there, so it went that way.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on second reading? All right, if we could vote. And that fails unanimously, so that dies. Now, before we move on, okay, Councillor Friesen. Well, I was going to go back to this. So I think that we need to give the staff a little bit of direction here. Yeah, I'm going to make my... Okay, go ahead.
So first of all, Your Worship, I would like to make a motion that a bylaw specific to the use of cannabis for the City of Medicine Hat be developed. That's my motion. And I just, a couple of comments in making it. You know, whether we like it or not, whether it agrees with our own value system or doesn't, it is made legal in the middle of this month by the federal government. So it's legal whether we like it or not. That's the first thing. It's not like we have a choice. It's there. The other thing is, it's fine for us to say, yes, we want a bylaw specific to the use of cannabis, which I believe we need. But imagine yourself in the shoes of our legal department, walking away from the table tonight and saying, okay, they want a bylaw specific to cannabis. Well, what does that mean? What elements are important to the council members and so on in us designing it? Or should we just make it up and bring it to them and see what they think? You know, it's a difficult conundrum and a very complex issue, as you have all indicated. So for me, I move that we develop a separate bylaw. I would also, this is my personal view based on what I've heard overwhelmingly in the public, and the rest of you can weigh in. I think we need to give some idea of what it could contain to the legal department tonight. It'll come back to public services. It can be debated again, but there needs to be some idea of the parameters. Personally, I support no public use, but there has to be some provision, given that it's legal, for some things. Provision in the bylaw for medical use. Provision for special licenses for fairs and events. Provision for a place to use some kind of designated areas, particularly the example that Councillor Turnbull gave. If you think about hotels, some hotels have smoking rooms, but they could choose not to have any. And this isn't all about smoking, by the way. There's going to be edible and all of those kinds of things down the road. If you own your own unit in an apartment building or something like that, you might be okay unless the condo board determines that no one can use it. If you're a renter in a building and your building says absolutely no one can smoke it and there's no other place for you, our bylaw needs to take into account some kind of provision for that. But for me, the basic element would be no public consumption. I believe it will be easier to have a more structured, strict bylaw at the beginning that we can relax after we find out, as Councillor McIntosh says, that not everyone in the community is walking around with a joint hanging out of their mouth. But, you know, we need to have some provision because it is legal. But I believe that our community supports, and overwhelmingly the province supports, the municipalities in the province support no public consumption. The other thing I want to say is that I think we need to be strongly lobbying the province. Now, AUMA will take that resolution forward. I think we all need to be writing in and saying, look, province, we need you here. We need you to establish some consistency in the approach provincially. I mean, imagine yourself trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to, you know, Brooks today, and then I'll be on Calgary, and then I'll be in Edmonton, and then I'm going to go to Grand Prairie, and I have to look up what theirs is because I don't know. I mean, just imagine the confusion. We need the province here to get behind us, all of us as municipalities, and bring some consistency. So anyway, that's my motion.
Okay, so
I'll second.
Sorry.
okay, I was just going to say, just the motion for a separate cannabis bylaw. Now, she made a whole bunch of recommendations that aren't part of the motion and suggestions, but the motion is a separate cannabis bylaw. So if I do have a very, very robust and strong seconding over there. So if we could, well, let's vote on that. Okay. And then I think that some of those recommendations that Councillor Friesen, I think that could just be, this will be worked out at the committee level. I do not want to make up a bylaw on the fly here tonight. No, I agree with most of her, but let's just vote on this, what we're going to do. This is a motion to make a separate cannabis bylaw, unless you want to say something before I push.
I guess I just want to confirm that I know we talked about a few of the points that Councillor Friesen brought about. Is that enough of direction from?
So it's a bit, but I know I'm not going to do this here tonight. I'm sorry. This will come to committee level with the first draft, and you'll have tons of times to make comments and kick this can all the way down the road. As far as I'm concerned, I do not want to do this here tonight. I'll let you say something, Solicitor. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, we're going to have a process for deciding what goes in the bylaw. So far, you're just saying you want a separate cannabis bylaw. We don't have a clue what we're drafting.
Well, there will be other municipalities that are doing similar things. You won't have to recreate the wheel. You can bring forward something, but we'll give you some. I just want to vote on this simple motion because it's getting convoluted here right now with a whole bunch of suggestions that perhaps the rest of the council doesn't agree with. Okay? So the motion is a separate cannabis bylaw. Okay? And I think most of you have voted already. Okay, we're in favor of that. Now, go ahead, Councillor Varga.
Well, I just wanted to ask where our jurisdiction ends as a council. Like, where do we even start on that for making rules? Shouldn't that go back to the government of Alberta to say, here's some of it and here's some direction? Or is it all going to be individual as to we can make the rules whatever we want it to be?
We can make the rules as long as they don't, contravene the Alcohol and Tobacco Act. We can't say you can have a pub where you can smoke marijuana if that's a provincial jurisdiction. So there's going to be a lot of work here. I know that the solicitor is getting wants more direction, but okay, Councillor Hirsch.
So with the fact that we just passed a direction to create a cannabis bylaw, and we look at the calendar and it's now October 1st, and again, reflecting on Solicitor Schmidt's worrisome face that says we have really nothing to work on, what's the timelines for returning this back to council, which I know that question's a loaded question because it depends, I get it. But understanding that the 17th we go live. So what are the, I think there's going to be a lot of citizens that says, okay, now that you're doing this, now what? So can we get maybe solicitor feedback in terms of what is in place that can satisfy the citizens to understand that there is a level of legislation in place, not that it's just the Wild West when we get to the 17th?
Yeah, so this is a rhetorical question on your part, but you're asking it so that for the citizens, because we will not have a bylaw, a municipal bylaw in time for the legalization. So if you...
Yeah, through the chair, I can confirm that there is regulation in place right now. The provincial legislation would kick in. The Gaming, Liquor, and Cannabis Act sets certain parameters and restrictions on smoking and vaping of cannabis, for instance, within 5 meters of playgrounds, sporting fields, play fields, skate bike parks, zoos, outdoor theaters, and outdoor pools and splash pads. There's also some restrictions in the Tobacco and Smoking Reduction Act that prohibits smoking of tobacco, which applies, such as in vehicles, in a public vehicle, within 5 meters of workplaces, within 5 meters of door openings and windows, and in certain public places as well, and there's a fairly long list of those. And on top of that, our current bylaw for smoking in public places would apply to cannabis at all, because under the legislation, any smoking bylaw applies to cannabis. So there is legislation. You have to look in a few different places to find it, but it does restrict. Now, certain places like sidewalks and roads, it will be permissible, and in certain public places that don't fall under the exclusions of places where you can't smoke cannabis. So it is probably somewhat similar to smoking, with some additional exceptions or additional restrictions set out in the provincial legislation.
Thank you, Councillor Hirsch.
Just a supplemental then. If businesses feel or that this action, or I guess inaction as the case may be, would impact their business, do they have certain abilities to say no cannabis smoking on the premises, within my businesses? I think that's important for people to understand and get empowered behind. Not necessarily saying we need to do a checklist of what you can and cannot do, but I think it's important now as we venture into this that a lot of people understand kind of what their rights within the provincial guidelines are, and my understanding is that you can, as a business, declare smoking within your area or not. So just want that point to be made.
Through the chair, that'd be no different than it is for smoking, prohibiting smoking on your premises as a private business or private property owner.
Thank you.
Okay, so I really do think that this needs to go back to the committee. You need to, Public Services, you need to maybe outline some of the other things, the exceptions you would like, and work through that coming forward. I'm just adamant that we're not doing this here tonight. Okay, Councillor Friesen?
If I could, Your Worship, I agree with you. I mean, we're not going to sit and draft a bylaw here tonight. It was important, though, that we drove home the reality that legal does need direction from us. So if I know that I went on and on, I wanted to make a point about detail, but you know, if the council is comfortable with us taking this back now to Public Services and talking about some of those pieces of detail, and letting us know what you think in that regard, then we will be able to bring a draft back, knowing, as Councillor Hirsch said, that there are some provincial regulations in place and our existing smoking bylaw, which will give some guidance in the meantime. It's not like on the 17th it'll be the wild, wild west.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Turnbull?
Thank you, Worship. I agree. It should go back to Public Services, and I would encourage all council members to try and join that committee for those discussions, so that we are not going back and forth and back and forth. I know that a lot of us, or some of us, are on time constraints. This young man and myself, being retired, we're not. We can go to as many meetings as we want. The rest of you, we understand, have other obligations. But I would encourage you to set a time, Chairman of Public Services, to get as many council members as possible so that we can get the feedback, we can get that information to the solicitor so that we can get a bylaw that at least give them a direction of where the bylaw should go. Thank you.
Okay, City Solicitor?
Yeah, just through the chair, I just want to, we can certainly assist that, but it's unlikely we will have a bylaw for the next meeting. If we're discussing this at the next Public Services, then it may go into council. So okay, just want to make that clear.
You are not going to have one. We don't expect you to. Okay. Any other, okay, so that we don't have any motions on the floor, okay. So that's going back to public services. And, okay, I guess we're ready to move on.
Okay, just one more item, which is an appointment for an outstanding vacancy for the Medicine Hat Youth Advisory Board. Councillor Samraj is speaking to this.
Yes, I will move that City Council appoint Tina Guyen to the Medicine Hat Youth Advisory Board, effective immediately for a term of 2 years.
That.
Any questions or comments? We could vote. And that was unanimous. Congratulations, Tina, if she's here. Okay, seeing no more. Oh, yes, Councillor Friesen.
Your Worship, another point of order. I've been kind of wordy tonight, haven't I? Pardon me, not point of order. Point of privilege. Tonight is the last council meeting of our CAO, Moretta Haglund. And Moretta, being her quiet, gentle self, didn't want everyone giving their personal tributes. It's hard. It makes it very hard. So I volunteered to say something on behalf of all of us, and I won't go on and on, but we want to make sure we honor you. So just a few things. I asked the council members for some of the words or phrases that they would say they thought would really best describe your years of service or what they appreciated about you. And I heard very strongly the word leadership. That you lead from the middle. It's not about you. It's not about your top-down directive. It's about finding a way to lead on behalf of everyone. That you put together an absolutely stellar team. That just were so solid. That you found the right people for the right job at the right time. That you had exceptional management skills and you were transformational in your leadership style. And that you were knowledgeable about all aspects of the city. Of course, we certainly found that out. I heard about how intelligent you were. I heard about how courageous you were and still are. That you didn't lead by the status quo. You made the changes that were necessary with courage, but also with compassion. I heard that you consistently drove us in the right direction. And that you set the city on a path of financial stability moving forward after the economic downturn and recession related to gas. And that's been a tough, tough job. And then I heard people talk about you related to people, your love of people, your drive and commitment to create a constructive culture in our city. And you've said that from the very beginning, and you have lived that life and walked that path yourself. And you've led everyone else in it. I personally have witnessed many times your compassion, your caring for people, and the respect you have for everyone around you. And I've particularly appreciated your humility. You know, I've watched, I've seen you. You don't, it's not about, here I am, you know, this is about me. It's about you stand back and let others take the credit they deserve for what they've done. And you stand in the background, yet you've led. So I think that is just so honorable. So anyway, Moretta, I also can't help but noting that you were the first woman CAO that we've had. And something that the mayor told me that he talks to the kids about, and this is so true. You know, he says, the mayor, you know, this is the mayor. And he says, well, you want a real career? You want to talk about being a CAO. I have one employee, and she has, I think you said 1,300. So that really stood out for me about how important the role of the CAO is, and how you took those very big shoes and filled them in such a humble, respectful, caring way. And you've been a very special person. So I would like everyone to stand with me and honor you as our departing CAO.
Well, that was probably more than you wanted, but you got it anyway. Okay, so seeing no more business before this council, we're adjourned. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't think you'd want to, sorry.
No, I don't want to say a lot, but I would just like to say, and I'm quite choked up now. Thank you, Julie. Those were very moving words. It's been an incredible privilege to work with each and every one of you and to work for the city, and I just want to say thank you to all of you. I've already had an opportunity to thank my staff, and as you know, I'm such a big promoter of this organization, and I believe you have the most robust organization. So allow them to work for you and trust in them, and they will deliver. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We're adjourned.